Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our second 2025 Level the Field webinar, this time on the really important subject of neurodiversity and mental health. My name is Liz Haynes, and I'm leading the campaign for Farmers Weekly this year. Neurodiversity is a subject really close to my own heart because I'm a dairy farmer with ADHD, and I'm currently doing a Nuffield scholarship on the subject. So we're now coming to the end of the second year of the Level the Field campaign, which focuses on making agriculture more equitable and inclusive. We shifted the spotlight from women in agriculture to neurodiversity this year, and I feel like we've had a really amazing year so far, started some really important conversations and raised the profile of this subject. We've had features and guides throughout the year on topics like recruitment, socialising, entrepreneurship, lots more besides. And an industry roundtable back in July, where we brought together our industry leaders and supporters of the campaign to discuss what we could do to make the industry more inclusive. So it's been a brilliant year and we've started some important conversations, but tonight we're going to be focusing on the subject of mental health. And we've got 4 brilliant panelists with us who are going to be sharing their experiences, both professionally and personally. So why are we doing a deep dive on mental health tonight? Well, hopefully you might have seen the survey that we did last year. We had over 1,700 responses to that. And of those people who identified as neurodivergent in the survey, 4 out of 5 of them said there was an impact on their mental health, and 1 in 5 of them severely. And we know that agriculture more widely experiences challenges with mental health, and we've got lots of unique sort of stresses and factors really that can sometimes make our industry a difficult place to be at times, whether that's market volatility, the weather, government policy, long working hours, all of those things. And we've made big strides in breaking the stigma down there in the industry, but so far I don't think that conversation has really touched on how neurodiversity fits in with that picture. So that's what we're going to be exploring tonight, really, is that overlap between mental health and neurodiversity. So we're going to be looking at the implications of that for people in the industry, what practical things we can do to support good mental health, and how we can break down some of the barriers preventing people from accessing the support that they might need. So I'm going to start with just giving a bit of an outline of the plan for the webinar tonight, and then we'll introduce our panelists, and then we can dive into the discussion. So this webinar is scheduled to last for around an hour. You can submit questions using the chat function throughout. The panel discussion is due to last for around 40 minutes, and then we'll have around 20 minutes of Q&A at the end. The webinar is being recorded and it's going to be available on demand. So if you can't sit still for the whole 40 minutes and you feel like you need to get up and walk around, don't worry if you miss a bit, because it's going to be available for you to watch back. So on to our brilliant speakers. So first of all, we have got Sharon May, who is a 2025 Nuffield Scholar researching mental health and is the owner of Kingsclear Counselling Service. And next we've got Emma Kubaisi, who is a neurodiversity coach, trainer and big impact consultant. Our third panellist is Sam Paris, a dairy farmer from the Blackdown Hills in Devon and a member of the Arla Board of Representatives. And last but not least, we have Dr. Georgina Taylor-Adrianson, counselling psychologist and co-founder of Minds Thrive. So welcome to you all. And now I'm just going to give each of the panelists a chance to kind of tell us a bit more about themselves. So we'll start with you, Sharon. Can you tell me a bit about yourself and your connection with those topics of farming, neurodiversity and mental health?
Thanks, Liz. Yeah, thank you for having me this evening. I'm quite excited about this webinar because it's all my favourite things. From a professional capacity, I've been working as a counsellor and psychotherapist for the past 10 years. I work with a wide range of adults, not just within farming, but within the rural community in which I live. Many of those individuals are neurodivergent. And as you mentioned, my Nuffield Scholarship, which is around supporting the mental health of farming families, neurodiversity is definitely a factor in the work that I'm doing in that research. From a personal perspective, I am married to a 4th generation farmer. I'm bringing up the 5th generation, which are now entering their teens. We have quite a neurodiverse household. I've recently been through the diagnosis journey myself. As a lot of people are coming to that sort of awareness later in life, I'm kind of a personal experience of that too. And I'm sort of very aware of how neurodiversity and mental health are closely linked. So this is a great topic to discuss.
Fab, thank you, Sharon. Emma, can you tell us a bit about your connections with Scottish agriculture and how you came to be involved in neurodiversity coaching?
Yeah, so thanks for the intro and having me here tonight. So I'm a neurodivergent coach. personally and professionally, I've been coaching for over a decade, but specifically specializing in ADHD coaching and working with clients who are neurodivergent for the past 4 years. And all the clients I work with now are particularly neurodivergent. In terms of working in rural and agriculture, I think I started my journey over 4 or 5 years ago. I don't come from a farming background, but my entry into it was being part of the very, very early stages of an amazing Scottish charity called Farm Strong. So I was part of the kind of very early group that helped kind of set that up. And that was amazing because that was all about bringing a program from New Zealand, looking at rural and farmer well-being over to Scotland. So I got that introduction, my first sort of taste of farming through them, and that's gone on, and it's headed up by an amazing team now. And then I also do stuff for SOS in a contracting capacity, and they look after farmer co-ops and collaboration, and then work with the Food and Drink Federation. So like many people who are neurodivergent, wear lots of different hats. So previously used to teach yoga as well. So I've huge, Sharon, massive passion area for well-being and neurodiversity. I was diagnosed over 30 years ago. So that's my story.
Fab, thank you, Emma. Sam, can you tell us a bit more about yourself and why you're supporting the Level the Field campaign?
Hi, everybody. I'm Sam Paris. I'm a dairy farmer from East Devon. And I suppose I've, since joining the Board of Representatives with Arla, had the opportunity to speak to and deal with lots of farmers within Arla and also the wider community, and realised that neurodiversity is a real sort of quite big thing within farming. I think all too often as young children, and I definitely was, didn't do very well at school, didn't get on very well in the education system, and was pushed towards agriculture as you know, the means of, you know, that's where children like me go, as one teacher put it, which was really sad at the time, but it's the best thing that ever happened to me, and being within agriculture is amazing, and being able to help people like myself. I'm dyslexic. I managed to deal with it over the years, and I suppose I've come from a time when dyslexia was an easy label to put on people that didn't do very well at school, but it's so much more than that. And just bringing all that together. Also within Arla, I sit on the Global Sustainability Working Group, which I know at the moment, sustainability, we talk about climate change and carbon, but you know, the farmers who run these farms, they are the most important part when it comes to sustainability, and dealing with your mental health is so important, because if you get your mind right, the farm just falls into place in so many ways, and farming is so much easier when your head is in the right place, and it's sort of part of that, really. It all comes together, and mental health is at the key and at the heart of it, really, for me.
Brilliant, thank you, Sam. So, you know, thank you to all of you for introducing yourselves there, and you know, we've got a wealth of experience in this panel, so really excited to start the discussion and see where we end up. So first of all, I'd like to start by just kind of explaining that overlap between neurodiversity and mental health. Oh, Georgina, I've skipped past you. Sorry, I'm using my head.
Right, let's
PhD brain to the forefront. Sorry, Georgina.
Yeah, it's all right. So I'm Georgina. I'm a psychologist. I've worked in the field for 20 years. I work for the NHS, so I work in adult mental health, and I also work for the neuro team. Part of my role is doing autism assessments. And I really got into the field of neurodiversity because I have a severely autistic non-verbal child. So it's an area that I have real personal passion for. So I'm actually here in my capacity tonight as a co-founder of Minds Thrive, which I developed with my colleague Ruth Schreiden. And Minds Thrive is an online digital resource for psychological well-being that we developed because it's really so difficult for people to access help and support.
Thank you, Georgina. Sorry to whiz over you there like that, but thank you for giving us your background there. So now let's kind of talk a bit more about this overlap between neurodiversity and mental health, because, you know, we know that the overlap exists. Our surveys kind of back that up, but they're not the same thing, are they? So I wonder if we can just kind of give a bit of an explainer for the audience of what the kind of difference is between neurodivergence and mental health, and perhaps why we think that overlap might be there. Sharon, I don't know if you want to start, and then we'll kind of bring in the rest of the panel. Oh, you're on mute, Sharon.
Thank you. How many years since COVID? Still haven't got used to it. Yeah, so mental health obviously is a scale in itself. You can have good mental health or poor mental health. I think it's important to specify that neurodivergence is not a mental illness. However, those that are neurodivergent very often struggle with their mental health for a variety of reasons. And I think the vast majority come from things like, a bit like Sam was explaining earlier, those labels and those messages you get given early in life, going through schooling or by parents or caregivers, about being lazy or unable to sit still for long, or not committed, or thick, or all those messagings that gradually erode self-esteem until they're swallowed whole, and people sit with those for long periods of their life, I think, and it makes that quite hard to overcome, especially if they're reinforced later on in life as well. I also think that there's an element of not fitting in. When you're not neurotypical and you are in an environment surrounded by those who are, it's very easy to feel like the outsider, and particularly when you're small, the natural conclusion you come to is, oh, there must be something wrong with me. And again, that tends to erode self-esteem, confidence, all those sort of things, which all play into the sort of mental health sphere, and are very difficult to sort of challenge sometimes if you haven't got a supportive environment to do so.
Georgina, does that kind of fit with what you would see in your practice?
Well, I just wanted to unpack for a moment what neurodiversity is referring to. So it's differences in how we think, how we learn, how we process information. And there are lots of natural variation amongst people in those areas. But we're talking about ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, Tourette's syndrome. So we're looking at typical prevalence rates of neurodiversity, about 1 in 100. Can be higher in different areas of society. But it was interesting from some research, it was 1 in 36 identifying as neurodivergent in the farming community. So we're seeing a higher level there. And where we have neurodiversity, it is not a mental health problem, neurodiversity, as Sharon said there, but 8 in 10 autistic adults struggle with their mental health. And I think Sharon started to outline some of the complex reasons as to why. There's often a sense of feeling different, not being understood. People will describe not having been given the guidebook, if you like, on how to do life, and being treated quite differently, which means people are often carrying an additional burden as they go through life, which has real consequences. So we see high levels of depression, high levels of anxiety, high levels of sleep disorders, all sorts of additional struggles in people who are neurodivergent.
Thanks for that, Georgina. Anything to add, Emma and Sam, on that? Or?
The only thing I would maybe add is just around about the impairment from an exec function perspective, which can help or can impair. So there's things that's kind of the cognitive system in your brain that helps you manage everything from organization to time management, but also emotional regulation. If that's impaired, that can be very, very different to manage your emotions. And a lot of the people that I coach and I find with myself have very big emotions, and that can be, if you're in under stressful situations, how does that show up? How acceptable is that? And I think definitely with the kind of dyslexia label that Sam said, when I was younger and I got diagnosed with dyslexia, it was like very much about a learning difficulty, as opposed to all of these other hidden things that you don't realize are going to impact you when you learn differently, communicate differently, process things differently. So even just how you experience the world is different. And if the world is designed for one way and it's not for you, that feeling of not feeling like you belong and can contribute is huge. So yeah, just to kind of reiterate what the other speakers said as well.
And I will just add that there's certain levels of sort of coexistence between mental health conditions and those who are more neurodivergent, that we all know that there's patterns with that, and also sometimes there's a misdiagnosis from clinicians in terms of people being diagnosed with a mental health problem, but actually there's an underlying neurodivergence which is causing similar symptoms or an appearance of something else, and so it's kind of complicated sometimes to tease out what the root cause of the issue is.
Thanks.
And it's funny, really, when I was young, I spoke to lots of people within the education community about why I wasn't doing very well at school when I was young, and all too often I was speaking to the same person, just in a different guise. They were not neurodivergent. They had no idea that they were neurotypical, as you put it. And so everyone I spoke to would still look at me in the same strange way as to why don't I learn in the same way? Yet I still managed to achieve what I had to achieve, but I wouldn't do it the way I was being taught to do it. And that's what they couldn't get their heads around is how are you getting to where you're getting without doing it the way we're telling you to do it? And it was almost like they were so closed off to the fact that my brain just worked totally different to theirs. That the easiest way for them to sum that up was to say that I had a learning disability or a learning difficulty, when all it was I was learning differently, and that's what they couldn't understand.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sam. So do you guys think that there is additional stigma around neurodiversity, and particularly neurodiversity and mental health in the farming population? And if that is the case, like, what do you think would be some of the steps we could take to break down some of that stigma?
I think I'll start on that, because yes, there absolutely is a stigma around it. And I think things straight away like this, the fact is we're talking about it now. I've been farming for 30 plus years now, and this is the first time I've had a conversation with anybody about being dyslexic where it hasn't turned into a joke fest at the end. And that's it, really. It's the same with every other topic, taboo subject that's sort of been untabooed over the last 20 years. This is like the last one to come to the surface and be talked about, and to be openly talked about. I think within the farming community, there is a lot of neurodiversity, and the reason it's gone sort of unnoticed, well, not unnoticed, but sort of just carries on, is because we all hide ourselves away on our farms, and we stay so insular and isolated. And isolation is the easiest way sometimes to deal with these things, because you can work it out for yourself, or that's what I've done. But yeah, it's great to be able to have an open conversation, a sensible, grown-up conversation with people who understand. But the strange thing, it's that old adage, isn't it, with mental health? It's a bit like having a broken arm. If you've got a broken arm, someone else with a broken arm's got a broken arm. But with a neurodivergent person, everyone is slightly different. There's no two of us that are the same. And so it's understanding where you are and where the other person is when you do speak. And also, I've had this conversation with many farmers who I know are, various ways along that spectrum of neurodivergent. And some of them are just sort of a bit wary about opening up and being honest about what they think and feel, because like me, they've been through the same sort of, being put down by other people, and sort of you do hide yourself away a little bit. Because I know it was like Sharon said earlier, I can remember every comment that's been said to me for the last 44 years. So, it does bite in pretty hard sometimes, but yeah.
Thanks, Sam.
Yeah, I think like you said, the conversations are happening, which can only be a good thing. I think language is important. It's people are moving away from the disability, the learning difficulty type language, which is great, and seeing it more as a difference rather than a disability, which I think is absolutely right. I think there is a danger of, oh, you're jumping on the ADHD train because it seems to be in the news a lot and people are just finding excuses. And I think we need to be wary of those conversations as well, because when someone finally has the confidence to go, oh, actually, do you know what? All this stuff I've struggled with and I thought it was just me, I'm seeing someone else struggle with that stuff too. And I think that might be something that I feel is appropriate to me. And then to get shot down by the, oh, well, everyone's a bit ADHD these days, is really damaging. And I think we need to be sort of mindful of that side of the stigma conversation as well, because, you see it in all sorts of chat environments, unfortunately. And, just as you're having the confidence to be curious about that, it's a real shame if that gets shot down.
I would agree with that, Sharon. In my autism clinic, I see the relief on people's faces when they have an explanation for the challenges that they've faced. And then I'll open up the paper and I'll see neurodiversity being shot down again. And I think, oh, it's sort of undoing the importance of that insight and self-understanding. And I think over the last 10 years in particular, there's been a rise of awareness about neurodiversity, but I would say that responses are still quite mixed, and people are being actually very thoughtful about who they disclose their neurodiversity to, with great wisdom.
Mhm. Yeah, and I would just add, sorry, just to that point, basically, it's also invisible. So I think when Sam's point about breaking an arm, you can see that, but actually there's external pressures of people responding to you if you come out and say, I've got this, or I think I have this, I've self-diagnosed this. But also you're doubting yourself because you're brought up with years and years of doubt, because when you do something differently, as Sam said, you're shot down or people are trying to steer you into a certain way. And because it's invisible, and sometimes you're like, is this really an issue? Why am I experiencing this? Why am I struggling in these situations? And that can be really, really challenging as well. And I think the conversations that we need to be having are conversations like this. I know Farm Strong Scotland team do stuff around about mental health. They do walk and talks, they do blether together. But also we need to be having conversations to kind of help people to say, well, why is there a rise in diagnosis? The rise in diagnosis for these reasons. The way we diagnose has changed. The more people are aware of it, then you see something in yourself and you realize, oh, I didn't know that. Or my children have been diagnosed, and then I realized about that. Or perimenopause has made the exec functions harder for women. So there is reasons and rationale. So as well as having the conversation around about neurodiversity and mental health, we also want to be putting positive messaging around to counterbalance some of those things that Sharon's saying, like well, everybody's about ADHD or whatever, because so we need to arm ourselves to help spread that message about, well, there is a reason why. So yeah,
I just want to flip back to that little point you made, Sharon, when you said about difference as opposed to disability. And on the one hand, it's brilliant that people are seeing it that way. Another thing that people talk about now a lot is superpowers. And for some people, that's a fantastic way for them to understand their neurodivergence positively. But for other people, that can put a huge amount of pressure on them to feel like, well, if I'm neurodivergent, I have to be super somehow. And that can put a lot of pressure on people too, right? What's everyone's kind of take on that?
Yeah, I think it's kind of trying to find the happy middle ground, isn't it? We've moved away from the disability language, but we don't want to make it, oh, well, you're going to be a superhero at this, because actually very often we're somewhere in between, and that almost diminishes those people who really struggle with elements of their life because of neurodiversity, because sometimes there is really difficult struggles that they face as a consequence. So yes, it's a mixed bag. And as Sam was saying, two people might have the same diagnosis, but they'll experience things entirely differently. It's not the same for everyone. And I think when we talk about why neurodiversity is so prevalent in agriculture, as Sam said, those kids traditionally who struggled at school or couldn't focus or weren't academically successful were kind of pushed into the manual jobs like farming, but then actually farming plays to a lot of those strengths, and so it's not necessarily a superpower, but it does provide us with certain skills that in a farming environment, a farming context, are particularly useful, but that doesn't mean that they don't struggle. So it's making sure that you've got both ends of that conversation, I think.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to add to the discussion. I think the umbrella term of autism is causing quite a bit of confusion. And I think when people are talking generally about autism, they're talking about the high functioning end. And, we've got people like Elon Musk doing extraordinary things. But we've also got people at the other end of the spectrum who don't have a voice. And what concerns me is the voiceless are not spoken of. And they do have real troubles in communicating their needs in the world. So it is a really broad spectrum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you for that.
And I would just, sorry, I would just build on what Sharon was saying about whether it was a superpower or disability. I think it's a very personal choice, and what we've acknowledged here about how you identify. And in some situations, I'm really pleased that it is being moved to a difference. And I do think actually if we start designing for everybody and that difference, great. But in some environments, I do feel it's a disability, and it feels disabling to not be able to follow what's going on in a conversation or understand and process information in the same way. And I think having that as a protected status in the Equality Act is quite important. And what I would hate is in some, without society elevating itself, so it doesn't need to be a protected status, that it is really important that it stays in there. But as from people's perceptions, you don't want necessarily to people to see it's a deficit or there's something wrong with you. It's like, okay, how can we help facilitate the best in you, whatever you're identifying as?
Brilliant. Let's talk now about some of the kind of unique stresses that we all face in our kind of farming lives or in the farming community. You know, what are those kind of stresses and challenges, and how might they exacerbate mental health challenges for neurodivergent individuals, do we think?
Well, I'll start on that. And, you know, I've had, I know I spoke to Liz about this in the past, about the stresses on farming that's changed over the years, and farming has changed massively. Let's not deny that. And we talked a minute ago about, you know, young people being pushed into agriculture, and often it's your families are in agriculture, and often that's because your family are all neurodivergent. And 50 to 100 years ago, all it mattered was how well you looked after your animals and how well you farmed the land. Now we do all that, and we're charged with sustainability. We have to save the planet. We have to provide reams of paperwork to organisations that we know nothing about. We provide, you know, the pressure on farmers when it comes with audits, things like red tractor. And, you know, I've been there and, you know, I've done it enough now that I can sort of get my head around it and the stresses it provides. And I've never had a red tractor audit that I failed or had any issues with, but the build up to that audit is so overwhelming in every way. You know, the week before the audit, I won't sleep at all. I'll go, you know, a week without sleep. And I know everything's done. I know everything's right. I know all the boxes are ticked, but it's that build up to that unknown. And it's just the downward pressure on you from outside organisations that never really were there. And I do feel really strongly that the whole auditing system of agriculture does need to change, because all too often we are being audited by companies who are full of people who just love paperwork. And as someone who's neurodivergent, the last thing on earth I want ever is paperwork. But it's part of farming now. And, you know, I'd love to see a situation where farmers can be helped get through audits, opposed to just audited and then told what they're doing wrong. And I think it's such a backward way of auditing farming. And unless these auditing organisations can change, and they have to change, you know, people are going to be turned off from the auditing process, which is sad. But sorry.
I was actually really amazed when I went to Ireland last year and met with some people at Tegas, and their Tegas advisors will help farmers with that paperwork and that audit process. They will like sit around the kitchen table with you and help you fill out your forms. And, you know, I don't think we've got anyone quite like that who would do that service. You know, obviously that's, you know, a government funded service, so they're not having to pay out of their own pocket for that either. And I just think that's brilliant, really, that because sometimes that's what you need, isn't it? That bit of support and to be able to delegate a job that isn't your natural skill set to someone else who gets it and can do it easily. Because that's the other thing. There are people, you know, people who find that stuff really easy, but it's just not always the farmer, because that's not their skill set, right?
Exactly. And too often the whole thing becomes a bit too adversarial. And that's the problem. That's where the whole, because, you know, now I get on really well with my auditor who comes and does my red tractor audit. You know, we're good friends, but years ago it wasn't like that, and that's what was so sad, really. And it's you know, we're all going the same way. We all want the same thing. We all want to achieve the same thing, and it's getting there together, not sort of apart, which it was before. So and it's, you know, and to anyone out there who's struggling with the build up to a red tractor, you're not alone. We're all in the same boat when it comes to these things. It's the whole thing. Don't be afraid to ask someone for help, because it's the whole problem shared is problem halved, all that kind of stuff. It's all fits in with this. But,
I think that the thing is, when you add in sort of a struggle with authority, either because of a dislike or a resistance to being told what to do, or to historic struggles from school and authority figures and that sort of thing, you've got this sort of compliance, regulation and inspection culture in farming now, which requires a great deal of planning, preparation, paperwork, organisation, which we know are really difficult for neurodivergent individuals, plus the sense of authority telling you what to do, which you're naturally going to want to push back at. And when you bury your head in your sand and you don't open the envelopes, or you don't tick the boxes, or you don't do what's necessary, and then the consequence of that is punitive. So you get punished, which is the opposite of what you need. And so it just perpetuates that cycle, like you say, and that adversarial nature of it. And I've also come across similar in other countries, Liz, about that kind of supportive. And it just completely changes the dialogue, because instead of this kind of powered mismatch of you need to do this and you need to do this now in a way that we are telling you to do it, that collaboration element makes a real difference, and it makes it so much more supportive, so much more. And it's just an understanding that we are asking people to do something that is inherently impossible for some people, difficult for others, and easy for a few, right? So that supportive nature is something that can make a real difference.
Absolutely.
And language is so important as well. You know, I know I pick on them, but it's what I know everyone has to do is red tractor. It's a red tractor audit. We in Arla are trying to move more to an advisory visit, and just sometimes just that change in wording can help so many people just to rethink what's about to happen. And just because if you get your head in the right place, it all goes so much easier. Just, like you were saying.
That's a great shout. Yeah. Brilliant. So in everyone's experience, what might be some of the signs that someone was sort of struggling with their mental health, but it's kind of going unnoticed? What might we need to look out for?
So I would say there are quite general signs that aren't specific to neurodivergent people. But when you're seeing withdrawal, an increase in irritability, a sense of hopelessness, neglecting things you might have engaged with previously, making more mistakes, when people's routine starts to change, those are all red flags that someone might be struggling with their mental health.
Thanks, Georgina. Has anyone else got any to add to that? Emma?
I would just say, from a neurodivergence perspective, thinking about, it's a bit technical, but the exec function. So for me and for my clients, when their organization, so someone that usually turns up on time starts being late, or things start to slip, or it's just things that are a little bit out of the ordinary, but things that they're going to struggle with because they're under stress. It will happen to all of us. But yeah, I would just kind of reiterate that if they're able to focus usually, or if they're getting more tired, like excessively tired. And I think it's the small changes and knowing who you're working with, trying to get to know, a change in your family member's demeanor. And definitely for some of my clients, they end up over communicating. So some people can become withdrawn, but other people are communicating more and more and more, and that's another sign of stress, because they might be over communicators already, but if they're really over communicating, what's going on there? So
yeah.
Carry on, Sharon.
Sorry, I think I'd add, sleep disruption, physical symptoms, headaches, muscle tension, gut issues, that sort of stuff, because often that communicates itself in other ways, like self-medicating with alcohol or food or anything else, that kind of tendency to rely on something to get through, something specific generally to sort of some of the more neurodivergent population, that kind of overwhelm burnout pattern, when you're noticing that happening more and more, and you're super productive but then super overwhelmed, and then flat burnout. And then when that's happening a lot, just kind of being aware of that. But I think, like all the others have said, it's just when something shifts, particularly in farming. I think it's when care drops, when you're not enjoying the things that actually used to give you joy on the farm, or you're not being as mindful of the animals. Like a sure sign that a farmer is struggling is when his animals are struggling, or the yard's more untidy than normal. I mean, some of them aren't very tidy anyway, but when there's a shift in the way things are being done, or there's a shift in the way they're presenting themselves, if they're not taking care of themselves in the same way anymore, then those are all signs that something's not okay.
Yeah, you touched on it there, Sharon, and I'm just going to open it up even more. Is within the farming community, if you're looking at farms and you're thinking, oh, that farm's a bit more untidy than it used to be, or the cows there's a bit more lameness in the herd, or fences haven't been fixed quite as quickly as you would have expected that farmer to do, I can guarantee it goes right back to his mental well-being, his mental health is suffering from one form or another. We often see in the news these stories of farmers that have been prosecuted for animal welfare neglect, and I hang my head in shame at the whole industry, if I'm honest, and I'll put it out there. The whole industry whoever's bringing these prosecutions, I feel so sorry for them, because I know for a fact that that whole incident could have been avoided if they could have gone in earlier with some mental health support for the farmer. Because animal neglect is a result of poor mental health for the farmer. And if they could help the farmer sooner than waiting till they can prosecute them for animal welfare problems, it would resolve the issues months in advance, and animal welfare issues would never have happened. So at the heart of every farm is the farmer, and they are the most important part. And anything that's gone wrong on farm, it is that there is always a link back to the farmer's mental health. And it's funny little signs. You know, if you see your neighbour's gates are broken when you thought, well, he, you know, last year he would have been out and fixed that by now. You got to think, what else is going on under the surface?
And it's all those things end up being symptoms of the thing at the root of it, like you say, and the thing, and that's when it implicates on safety and things like that as well. And
then it becomes a downhill spiral, doesn't it? Because as a farmer, you know, every farmer is proud of their farm, and we all want the tidiest farms, we all want the best cattle, and when that slips, and you know it slips, and you try and avoid, you know, doing that job or fixing that thing, it becomes harder and harder to then get back on the horse and get back to where you were, and it becomes a downhill spiral, and it's so difficult sometimes to get out of that spiral. And you do sometimes just need someone to come along and put their hand on your shoulder and say, "You're all right, can I give you a hand?" And sometimes it's something simple as helping the farmer fix a fence, so that he doesn't spend 2 days trying to fix a fence, and you help him get it done in a couple of hours. The help that can give that farmer is more than you'll ever know. You know, he might thank you for helping him fix a fence, but you may have fixed an awful lot more than that.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sam. How can we think about the interplay between neurodiversity and mental health support? Like, what adaptations or changes might be needed for a farming or rural audience to access that support? Who's going to go first?
I suppose
Sharon?
from my point of view, I quite like the idea of having support or material that's available that isn't in a PDF document, because there's a plethora of help if you're prepared to sit and read a book. And as we've all explained, that's not really where most of us want to be. And so something like a YouTube channel or even a TikTok channel, I can't believe I'm saying this, but a TikTok channel with little videos of little things, and it doesn't even have to be directly related to mental health. It can be about other stuff, and you find that video that clicks with you, or that, you know, that change of mindset situation. Because if you can change how you feel, so if you feel a bit better, other things start to get better as well, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. But yeah, just other forms of information flow into that person.
Sorry, Sam, I just really resonate with the points that you're making there. And I think what you're sharing, it was a real motivating factor for Ruth and I in developing Minds Thrive, because not everybody wants to have therapy and to talk in depth about what's going on for them. But actually, if they can have a reliable resource, something that they can listen to, that's not going to take them hours, that they can fit into their day and just learn practical skills for helping, is kind of what we're all about at Minds Thrive.
And I do hope the whole rise of AI will also help that. You know, as much as everyone's scared of AI, there's some amazing tools out there. You know, I know lots of farmers who have conversations with ChatGPT or whatever it's called, and they ask them about how they work out farming issues. And it's nice, because some people don't want to have to talk to another human being. I know that sounds strange, but some people don't want to have to, you know, some people who are neurodivergent are more than happy to have a chat with a computer. You know, and if that's what works, that's what works.
Absolutely. Emma, did you want to come in with something there?
No, it's just to follow on with those points, just about the audio stuff. Like, there's loads of great podcasts out there, content specific for farmers, around about mental health. They have interviews with people around about neurodiversity. So yeah, just even being able to have something in that one.
Brilliant. Thanks, Emma.
I think the more resources out there, the better, basically, in any format, because then people can choose the format that works best for them. And I think, you know, there's all sorts of things like both those guys have mentioned. I will say that I think one of the barriers when people do actually want to seek professional help is finding someone that is sensitive, not just to neurodiversity, but also speaks pharma. I think that's quite hard to find. And to find someone that does both is really difficult sometimes. So that presents an added challenge, and there isn't an easy answer to that. But it's about asking the right questions and not being afraid to say, I need to speak to someone who understands ADHD, or I need to speak to someone who has an idea of what it's like to be on a farm, when you're looking for the right person.
So just like developing on from that, then what practical steps do you think individuals can take to look after their own well-being and mental health? Like, let's just see if we can come up with like one or two really simple practical things that people could kind of take away either for themselves or someone in their family or their team, that might be helpful.
Well, at Minds Thrive, we have something called Care and Grow, and I'll just try and be super brief about it. You can find out about it on our website. But what we know is connection is fundamentally important to mental health, and we know people communicate best and connect most effectively within their own neurotypes. So finding those people that you relate to. So care, acts of kindness. Can we treat ourselves respectfully? Respecting your body, looking after yourself, enjoyment, finding things that give you a sense of meaning and purpose. And we're looking at sort of gratitude, finding things that you appreciate each day. That makes such a difference, but hard to do at first. And reflection, checking out your thinking. Am I thinking about things in the most helpful way? And sometimes talking with another person is the best way of checking that out. Working towards your goals, optimizing achievement, and bringing in wisdom into how you see things. So we've got this free resource on our website. We are making some changes, so I would actually direct you to our YouTube site for more on our resources there.
Thanks, Georgina.
I would maybe just add as like trying to learn what works for you, because I think what I see with my clients, when they start to understand, okay, these are what works for me. So a lot of my clients need, and a lot of people who are neurodivergent work really well to visual accountability. So if you're coming into a really busy time, like the red tractor audit, having something super visible there that's a non-negotiable list to remind you to eat, to hydrate, like those basic fundamental needs that, if you get hyper focused on something or you're under stress, things like that, the exec functions can make it so hard to do the basic things. So wherever you are in the family or wherever you are on the farm, thinking about those visual reminders. And then I would just think about micro recovery moments. So ideally, it's great if you can take all this amount of time off and do the exercise, but actually even just 5 minutes, stepping outside and knowing when your nervous system just needs a little bit of noticing what drains you, just starting to kind of look within a little bit more. So that's what's going to help you the most if you start to able to kind of guide yourself through difficult things that are coming up.
You've made me think about energy accounting, and I've certainly found that with my neurodivergent clients, that's so helpful. Checks and balances, what restores me and what drains me, and can you try and keep that in balance? And I appreciate that with farming, it's an intense industry and there are seasons with lots of intensity. So how do you replenish yourself?
I think Armstrong Scotland, I've also got the 5 ways to wellbeing, which is a research tool as well, which looks at like these 5 things that you can have them in balance at different points, but what do you need to focus on as well? So that's another tool to look up. Sorry, Sharon.
No, that's fine. I totally agree with the 5 ways to wellbeing thing. I think that's a great resource. I would add the tendency can be to slip into black and white thinking, and I think remembering that very often there's something in between. So it's, when it's tough, it's really tough, but it's not all bad, and we can be grateful for things at the same time, but it's not all amazing. It's just like some days it's rubbish, other days it isn't, but generally it's somewhere in between. And that inner self-critical voice that tells you you're rubbish and you're useless and all that sort of stuff, it's remembering that that's something that you've heard, but it might not be true. In fact, very often, that kind of, those thoughts can lie to you. It's sometimes I'm not very good at this, but other times I can be really good at it. Or I might be rubbish at paperwork, but that means I'm great at something else. It's just kind of moving away from that catastrophizing element, I think, in order to just help themselves and create a bit more balance. Like Georgina was saying, what replenishes me, it's the same with our thought patterns. Steer away from the black and white and try and get somewhere in the middle.
Brilliant.
Yeah, all I can talk about is what I do, and when it comes to red tractor audits, I think it's been mentioned before. I make my to-do list of what I know has to be done, and I do one thing at a time. So that list is only ever getting shorter. I try not to do lots of things at once, to 10 things, and so I do one thing at a time. So the list is being ticked off and get down. But in between each thing, I'll reward myself. So I'll go and do something I enjoy. So whatever that may be, personally, I do enjoy singing to myself, and I do that quite a lot. So I put my headphones on, go milking, and I'm normally singing to myself. And my wife often comments about how she can tell I'm getting back to where I need to be is when she can hear me singing over the cows and over the milking parlour.
I love that.
I also sometimes vocalize my thoughts, as I call it, which to everyone else is I'm just talking to myself. But it's the way I get things right in my head. And I would say to anyone, if you've got kids or parents or whatever, if you find them off talking to themselves, just let them be, let them do it. I find it's such a valuable tool of getting stuff right in my head that I have to say it out loud. And I suppose that sort of comes in, with young farmers. I used to do a lot of public speaking in young farmers, and that used to help me massively. And just being a bit out there really with things like that, and not being afraid to say stuff out loud. And I know sometimes for some people they don't want to do that with other people around, and that's fine. Take yourself off somewhere on your own, vocalize your thoughts, get yourself where you need to be, and that's what I do. So that's all I can comment on is what I do and what works for me. So yeah,
brilliant. Thank you, Sam.
That's fantastic.
That's a good note to finish up on. So thank you, everyone. I think we've had a really kind of wide-ranging discussion there, and now we've got some time to go to some questions from the audience. So I'm going to start up with one here. How do we think we can support people who don't articulate their needs or don't want to sort of burden other people with work or admin?
Do you know, I think that's not an uncommon problem, isn't it? And I think it's about the environment that we create. We can but ask. So I know with my supervisor, she always begins by asking how I'm doing and what my needs are. And if we can start to create that environment where people start to feel safe to share what they need and what would be helpful for them, I think that's a really good place to start.
Mm-hmm.
I think something I was thinking about with this question was a lot of my clients struggle to identify what their needs are. So if you're in a new workplace, or even sometimes when I go into new roles thinking, actually, what is it I need? So it's about how you can help facilitate that conversation with them, maybe give them some options as well about, so it's a kind of, if they are struggling, obviously, if they're not, ask them first of all, but if they do seem, sometimes that blank sheet of paper or that blank giving them a bit of a template can be super helpful to say, look, these are the sort of things that we could potentially do. So that's how I work. Sorry, on you go.
I was just going to say, following on from Georgina's thing of checking in with people, I think a lot of people don't want to be a burden, and they don't want to be awkward, and they don't want to ask for something that no one else needs. But by checking in with them, you're communicating that what they need is valuable, which is something they haven't learned through their personal experience necessarily, but you're communicating to them by checking with them that actually their needs do matter, and that it's okay to ask for them, and that will in turn allow them to feel like they're not a burden, that it's they're able to kind of voice what it is that they need and understand that that's okay.
And sometimes I think when individuals are under pressure, say in pressure situations building up to something, and for the people that are trying to support them, it's really hard, but sometimes you just find something that seems to help. It's silly little things like making them a cup of tea or something, or giving them a biscuit. If you find, or you think, if you've done that for someone close to you and you think it's helped, do it again. And don't ask them whether it's helped, because they won't be able to tell you whether it's helped. But if you think it's helped, do it again. And if it seems to help, carry on doing it, because sometimes I can't ask for help, and I do exactly the same. I fall in on myself a little bit, and I have to do it all myself, and I can't let anyone else help me. But that support from the people around you, in whatever way it is, just being there sometimes is enough. And don't think that if you ask someone, can I help you, and they say no, that you have to go away. You can just be there for them. And just being in the same room sometimes is enough support, more than a lot of people will realise.
Thanks, Sam.
I wonder if it's also about having the right environment as well, where people are set up to do well. So one of the things I work on with my clients is 4C. So they have certainty. So people understand what's happening next. So people understand what's expected to them, clarity, connection, as Sam said there, about making a cup of tea, and also choice, giving people choice when they can, even if it's a small choice. So when you're working with people, thinking about that inclusive or supportive environment, what are the things that you're going to put into that? What's the ingredients into the recipe to make that an environment where people are going to be supported, and everyone, not just if you're neurodivergent or, you know, whatever. It's like everybody's going to benefit from that.
I would say that's absolutely true. The adaptations that you make for neurodivergent people work really well for neurotypical people. And it's often really small things that make a difference to people. So having the capacity to have a bit of time out, having an understanding of how neurodiversity impacts your colleagues, and being, you know, eye contact can be really difficult for people. So understand what's motivating that. They're listening, it's just painful. So it's about attitude shifts and little changes in the environment, using ear defenders to help people with sensory sensitivities.
I will just say, like, quite often, particularly in farming, you've got a neurodiverse employer and a neurodiverse employee, and they may not communicate. They may communicate really well, but sometimes there's a clash because one might have a certain way of doing something and they can't understand why the other person won't do it that way, because that's obviously the way it should be done. And so it's just kind of being mindful that even if you're neurodiverse yourself, that someone else's neurodiversity may require different things to what you think they need, and just kind of being open to those conversations. So it's kind of checking on your assumptions, I think, but whether, you know, when you're working with someone, as you know, are they doing that because they're trying to be obstructive, or because they're not listening, or they don't care about how you want them to do it, or are they just doing it that way because there's something else going on? And then listening, ask and listen.
And I think beyond that, and just in practical terms, you know, when things are stressful on the farm and you're working together and it's not going well, sometimes tell that person to go and do something else, and let them go and do something else, and you do that job on your own. And that person will probably thrive doing the other job on their own. So sometimes a bit of separation is also good, to be able to, you know, do what you need to do to help, but do it somewhere else.
I think that probably applies in like families and households as well, doesn't it? And in lots of walks of life, really. Yeah, absolutely. Right, let's move on to another question. Someone has asked, they're interested to know if there's any research on the links between neurodiversity, mental health, and alcohol dependency on farming. Anyone come across any research there, or general kind of thoughts on that?
I would say my observation has been about sometimes the use of alcohol in social occasions to help people relax a little bit more. People have certainly told me about things like that. With ADHD, we can see more impulsiveness sometimes, and that can be associated with higher alcohol intake.
Thanks, Georgina. Emma, is that something you know about at all? Sam, sorry, did you want to come in first?
All I was going to say was, often I find it was a link of, you know, you go to the pub and everyone's drinking a pint of beer, so you have to have a pint of beer. And sometimes I wouldn't want a pint of beer, but the pressure was there to have one, because everyone assumes that you have a drink and you'll feel better because you'll be more relaxed. And I suppose it's something, as I've got older, that actually I don't want to drink any alcohol. Sometimes I need to go to the pub to relax and I don't need alcohol. And it's really silly things like the rise of non-alcoholic beer has helped, because I can have a pint of beer, so it looks like I'm having a pint just like everyone else is, but there's no alcohol in it. And that's helped me massively, because I also know, and I would be stood there in the pub sometimes thinking, right, I'm going to have a really rubbish day tomorrow because I'm going to have a hangover, and I don't want a hangover tomorrow. So now I can go and drink 4 pints of non-alcoholic beer, and next morning I feel absolutely amazing. And the anxiety of having a hangover was worse than the problem I was trying to solve by going to the pub in the first place. So yeah,
that's all tied in with that kind of being an outsider thing again, isn't it? It's like you want to be part of your community, you want to fit in. There's the societal pressure to kind of join in, be a man, be a farmer, have a drink, all that sort of stuff. And that adds to the stress and it adds to the pressure. But I also think, like, societally, if you look at the media, the kind of idea that when you're stressed, you have a drink is really prevalent. I mean, look, James Bond is classic. Like, every time something bad happens to him, he goes and pours a whiskey, and it's like, that's not the solution, but that's what we're being taught by the messages that we see in the media and stuff, is when you're stressed, have a drink. But we know that is not an effective long-term coping strategy. If you're doing that all the time, it has an impact. And I think, there's definitely a link between alcoholism and mental health, well, even alcohol dependency or alcohol use and mental health. And it can be a bit chicken and egg, because it's hard to tell which came first and which spiraled the other. And as Georgina was saying, I think sometimes alcohol and neurodiversity have a close link too, certainly in terms of, making situations easier.
And often in farming, when you're in a stressful situation, the problem is not that you need an alcoholic drink. Sometimes I find it's actually you just need a drink of water, because you're so busy, you're dehydrated, and dehydration is the worst thing when you're in a stressful situation.
And I just think that neurodivergent people, I certainly experience this. We sometimes can have just really poor sense of our own feelings, and so I don't recognize I'm thirsty until I am literally so gasping that my mouth is as dry as Gandhi's flip-flop, or I don't realize I'm hungry until I'm literally my blood sugar has dropped through the floor and I'm raging, and I really have to consciously remind myself to do those things. But those being hungry and thirsty or overtired or whatever really don't help you to deal well with the kind of normal stresses of a day on a farm, right?
Yeah, I was just going to say, to reiterate what everyone said, so the social lubricant side of things. And then for me, with my clients who are ADHD, the dopamine chasing when they do drink and not being able to understand sometimes when's too much, and that whole relationship with alcohol. So I can definitely, whilst I don't know if there's any concrete research on that, anecdotally, because a lot of my clients have choose not to drink, or choose, as Sam says, now to have those non-alcoholic drinks because it's just a safer choice for them, because it can just be a difficult relationship with it.
Cool. I'm going to do one more question and then we'll wrap up, because we're getting close to 8 o'clock now. So we've already covered this a little bit, but how do we consider that organizations like DEFRA or those other kind of organizations that we have to be compliant with can make provision for neurodiversity within the agricultural sector? What kind of strategies will we offer to DEFRA and to those organizations? How can they help us to kind of function better, I guess?
I've got stuff to say, but I feel like I should let Sam go first on this one.
I was just going to say that I recently filled in a DEFRA form, and at the bottom there was a little tick box saying, would you like to be involved in research and trying to make these forms easier to fill out? So I ticked the box, and I've done 2 now, where I've basically done one-to-one session on the computer with the DEFRA officials, where they've gone through new forms that they've invented, and they've asked me what they like to fill in. And I've just told them honestly, well, I hate this and I don't like doing this, and that was really good, and I think that was good, and they were like, that's brilliant. I wish more people would be this honest with us, because all too often we blame DEFRA for rubbish forms, or rubbish this or rubbish that. Well, all too often it's because they haven't had enough feedback when they're putting them together. So we can all do this. We can go on the DEFRA website and we can volunteer to be part of their little research scheme, and they'll come and ask you for help, and we can help build the DEFRA of tomorrow by helping them today. It's so simple, and I've done the first one. I thought, well, that was a bit of a waste of time, but I've done a couple more, and I think actually I do feel like I'm helping them put a better form together.
And if anyone else is interested in participating in that kind of thing, there is actually a link on the Level the Field website. So if you want to do what Sam has just described, head to the Level the Field website, and there's a link where you can sign up to participate, because you're absolutely right, Sam, we've all got to do our bit, haven't we? If we don't tell them what we want and how they can make the services better, they're not going to know, are they? So that's really fantastic.
Yeah, I think collaboration has to happen in both directions, right? It has to be a two-way street. We can't expect them to know. They can't expect them to mind read as much as we'd like them to. I think the system does have to be more user-friendly. I think very often we see policies and regulations and stuff focusing on the statistic, not on the person doing the work. And I think that needs to shift slightly to understand that when they're asking for whatever they're asking for, there is a human being at the other end of that. But like you say, if they're willing to listen and to take on board that feedback and make the changes, then that's good. And it's up to us to kind of put that information in their hands to see what they do with it.
Fab. Well, I'm going to wrap up there because we're pretty much on 8 o'clock. So I just want to thank everyone for a brilliant discussion. I just love that we've been able to talk so openly about this subject and, hopefully give people some practical things they can take away and a bit of a deeper insight, really. So thank you all. Thank you to the audience for joining us tonight. And thank you to our Level the Field supporters and partners, Arla, DEFRA, DeLacy Executive, Frontier and Lantra for making this campaign possible and for helping us to raise the profile of this really important subject. But thank you especially to our 4 brilliant panelists for sharing their experiences so openly. We really appreciate it from all of you. So although we're coming to the end of the campaign year, there's still a bit more Level the Field content to come. A feature on mental health is due to be published in Farmers Weekly very shortly. The mental health guide is already available on the Level the Field website, so check that out if you want to continue thinking about this subject. And the final guide of the year will be about inclusive workplaces, and that one is due in December. So keep an eye out for that. Next year, Level the Field is shifting the focus to physical health, and there is a survey live at the moment where you can fill out your experiences of your physical health within farming. So again, do head to the Farmers Weekly website and fill out that survey if you're able to. And yeah, just thank you again, everyone. I really hope we can keep these important conversations going. So please continue to, share the materials, use the materials, keep having these conversations and share your feedback with us about the Level the Field campaign so that we can continue to evolve and develop it and keep talking about these really important things. Thanks, everyone.